Ready to go, zero waste. We're diving deep into a guidebook all about making your office a little greener.
It's full of practical tips for making a difference every day.
I think you'll be surprised by some of the stuff in here.
Oh, definitely.
Whether you're already a sustainability pro or just starting out this deep dive is going to give you a lot to think about.
For sure.
So to set the scene, this guidebook is all about how to make the transition to a zero-waste office.
Yeah, it walks you through everything.
From getting the higher-ups on board to actually making the changes and even finding the right vendors to work with.
The whole 9 yards.
It's really comprehensive, but one thing that stood out to me was the statistic. They mentioned that half.
Half?
Yeah, a whopping 50% of all plastic produced is single-use.
Wow.
That's a crazy amount of waste.
It really puts the problem into perspective.
It does, right? We all know single-use plastic is a problem, but to think that half of it just ends up in landfills or worse, in the ocean.
Scary.
It's pretty jarring.
And that leads to what the guidebook really focuses on.
That's right, the problem of plastic pollution. They don't sugarcoat it either. They paint a pretty vivid picture of all that plastic being dumped in the ocean.
It's a truckload every minute.
Oh, every minute.
It's a wake-up call for sure.
Definitely. And the guidebook goes on to explain why plastic is such a challenge. Only about 9% actually gets recycled.
And even that process takes a lot of energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not as simple as tossing something in the blue bin and calling it a day.
No, it's more about understanding the whole life cycle of a material and realizing that reducing our consumption is the most effective strategy.
So focusing on not creating waste in the first place.
Exactly.
Now, this is where offices come in. The guidebook points out that offices, especially places like cafeterias and washrooms,
Oh, yeah.
are major contributors to this problem.
You've got all those disposable cups and cutlery and individually wrapped snacks.
I know it adds up.
And it's so easy to just go with the flow when you're busy at work.
I know, you just grab a plastic cup of coffee without even thinking.
Exactly. The guidebook really encourages us to slow down and consider our everyday choices.
And the great thing is it doesn't just point out the problems. It also gives solutions.
Oh, absolutely.
It really stresses that the best way to manage waste is to not create it in the first place.
Prevention is key.
I love that, getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
But where do we even begin? Offices are full of disposable stuff.
Well, the guidebook highlights 4 of the biggest culprits.
Okay, lay it on me.
Tissues, those tiny single-use sachets, paper cups.
And the ever-present peat bottle.
Exactly.
It's funny how those things become so ingrained in our office routines. It's like we don't even see them anymore.
We just reach for them without thinking.
And that's why the guidebook dedicates so much space to practical alternatives. Like, imagine walking into the break room and instead of that jumbled mess of plastic condiment packets, you see these sleek, refillable dispensers.
Much nicer.
It would be such a welcome change, not just for the environment, but aesthetically, too. It just feels more intentional.
It shifts the mindset from disposability to intentionality.
Exactly. And that's a theme that runs throughout the guidebook.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've identified the problem, we're embracing a reduction-first approach, and we're starting to envision some practical solutions. But how do we actually make this happen in a real office setting?
Well, the guidebook lays out a step-by-step plan for transitioning to a zero-waste office. And it's surprisingly detailed. It covers everything from getting buy-in to measuring your success.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk us through this roadmap.
Step 1 focuses on getting support from the top. They emphasize building a compelling case for going zero waste and getting those key decision makers on board.
Makes sense. You need them to really create change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And once you have that leadership backing, step 2 is all about putting together a team.
The team.
Yeah, a team of passionate people to champion the cause.
Love that. They call your A-team.
Right. It's all about finding those individuals who are really committed to sustainability and empowering them to lead the charge.
Is harnessing that energy and enthusiasm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Then comes step 3, which gets into understanding your office's waste.
Okay, time to get our hands dirty.
Well, not literally. But it does involve conducting a waste audit
A waste audit.
to figure out what types of waste your office is generating and how much.
So we're actually going through the trash.
Basically, the guidebook even gives you specific categories to help you break it down and see where you can make the biggest impact.
That's super helpful. It's about moving beyond assumptions and getting a clear picture of the problem areas. What's next?
Step 4 is where the rubber meets the road. It's about proposing specific changes to your office's infrastructure, processes, and even procurement practices.
So this is where we ditched the disposables and switched those sleek dispensers.
Exactly. The guidebook is full of these kinds of practical swaps, and they're not just about reducing waste, they're often about finding more efficient and cost-effective solutions.
Okay, I'm curious. What's one of those swaps that really stood out to you?
One that caught my eye was replacing plastic coffee stirrers with steel spoons.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's such a simple change, but it eliminates a ton of plastic waste.
Wow, I never would have thought of that. It's amazing how these little tweaks can add up. So we've got the leadership on board, our A-team assembled, we've analyzed our waste, and we've got a plan for change. Now what?
Step 5 is all about getting everyone else on board. They emphasize developing a communication plan.
They keep everyone in the loop.
Right, to keep everyone informed and engaged.
So it's not just about changing the physical environment, it's about changing the culture.
Exactly. The guidebook encourages us to get creative with our messaging, to make sustainability fun and engaging,
Like a game.
instead of it feeling like just another corporate initiative.
I like that they even suggest activities like plogging,
Logging.
which is basically jogging while picking up litter.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a way to get people moving, connecting with nature, and feeling good about making a difference.
I love it.
Okay, I'm sold on plogging. So we've got everyone excited and informed. What's next?
Step 6 is where we actually implement the changes,
The moment of truth.
ideally in phases, and then we monitor their impact.
So tracking progress and making adjustments as needed.
Exactly. And then the final step is all about making those zero waste practices stick.
So it's not a one-time thing. It's about changing how your office operates for good.
Precisely. It's about embedding those sustainable practices into the culture of your workplace.
This is fantastic. We've gone from a shocking statistic about plastic waste to a concrete plan for action. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we've got to talk about all the waste we're already generating. What are we supposed to do with all that?
That's where things get really interesting. The guidebook dives into waste management, and it's not just about recycling.
I'm all ears. Most of us are probably guilty of just tossing stuff in the recycling bin and hoping for the best.
Well, the guidebook challenges us to do better. It really emphasizes understanding the different types of waste.
And how they're processed.
Right.
So like separating paper from plastic, composting food scraps, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes even further, encouraging us to think about the hierarchy of waste management.
Hierarchy.
Yeah. It's basically a framework that prioritizes the most sustainable actions.
Oh.
So first, you want to reduce your consumption.
Reduce.
Then reuse what you can.
Reuse.
Then recycle what's left.
Okay.
And only as a last resort do we send things to the landfill.
So it's about moving away from that take, make, dispose model
Exactly.
and embracing a more circular approach.
Right. And the guidebook has tips for every level of that hierarchy.
Like what?
Well, for example, instead of just throwing out old furniture,
Right.
it encourages us to explore upcycling or donating it.
It's funny how we often forget about those simple solutions.
Yeah.
We're so quick to buy new stuff when there are perfectly good resources already out there.
It's a real cultural shift, but the guidebook reminds us that it's worth it.
For the environment and probably for our wallets, too.
Oh, absolutely. There are some serious cost savings when you start reducing waste and reusing materials.
For sure. And we can't forget about the social impact, too.
Right.
Donating old furniture to charities or community organizations can make a real difference in people's lives.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our actions have a ripple effect.
I love that, connecting with our communities and realizing that what we do in our offices can impact others.
And speaking of ripple effects, the guidebook has a whole section on greening those special occasions that happen at work.
Oh, yeah. Office parties, team celebrations, even just everyday gifting.
All that stuff.
Yeah,
It's easy to fall back on those disposable decorations and snacks,
it is.
but the guidebook challenges us to rethink those habits.
Huh.
It's full of creative alternatives.
Like what?
Well, instead of balloons and plastic streamers,
Right.
they suggest things like potted plants,
Oh, nice.
which can be enjoyed long after the party's over,
Right.
or even making decorations from recycled materials.
I love upcycling. It's all about getting creative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for food, they suggest choosing things that can be served in bulk,
Okay.
using reusable dishes and cutlery.
Ditch those paper plates and plastic forks.
Right. It's about making those conscious choices even when we're celebrating.
And I bet there are some amazing sustainable caterers out there these days.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So many delicious options.
It doesn't have to be a sacrifice at all. And I think people appreciate it when you put in the effort.
I think so.
Yeah.
It shows you care.
And it sets a good example.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've covered reducing waste, managing what we do generate, even greening our office celebrations. What stands out to you from all this?
That's a good question. For me, it's that shift in mindset.
From what to what?
from thinking about things as disposable to being more intentional.
Oh, I see.
The guidebook really encourages us to pause and think about the impact of our choices.
To really consider those sustainable alternatives.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect, it's about being mindful.
I like that. And those small steps can really add up, especially in offices.
Oh yeah, think about how much consumption happens in the workplace every single day.
It's a lot. Now, I'm sure some people are listening and thinking, this sounds great in theory, but how do I actually make it happen?
That's the big question, right? It's one thing to read about it,
But actually putting it into practice.
especially in a busy office with lots of people.
Exactly. The guidebook actually gives some really practical tips for dealing with those challenges.
Oh, good.
What are some of those?
Well, one thing they really stress is starting small.
Okay.
You don't have to do everything at once,
So small steps.
right? Just pick one or two areas where you can make a real difference.
Like what?
Well, you could start with something simple, like switching to reusable coffee cups,
Oh, yeah.
or getting rid of plastic water bottles and using refillable ones instead.
Okay.
It's about celebrating those small victories.
Because those small changes can inspire others.
Exactly. And the guidebook encourages us to be creative too.
Creative.
Yeah, like thinking outside the box and finding solutions that work for our specific workplaces.
So not just a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right. It's about adapting those principles to your own situation.
Makes sense. They also talk about the importance of teamwork, right?
Definitely. You don't have to do this alone.
Get everyone involved.
They recommend putting together a green team or a sustainability committee.
So people can share ideas and support each other?
Exactly. It's about building a community around sustainability.
I love that. And of course, communication is key.
So important. The guidebook really highlights that.
Keeping everyone informed about what's happening.
Right. And celebrating those wins along the way.
It's about making sustainability visible.
And showing people that their actions are actually making a difference.
And when people see that, they're more likely to stick with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really encouraging.
You know, it's interesting how this conversation has gone from focusing on the environmental benefits of zero waste to also recognizing how it can impact company culture and morale.
Yeah, it's a big part of it.
When employees feel like they're part of something positive, it can really boost their engagement.
It can. It's about creating a workplace where people are proud to work.
And excited to contribute.
Exactly. And that can lead to some real benefits for the company, too.
Yeah.
Well, things like increased productivity and lower turnover.
So it's a win-win.
Definitely.
But we can't forget about the bigger picture here. Why is this movement towards zero-waste offices so important?
Well, we talked about plastic pollution earlier.
Right. A global crisis.
And offices with all those disposable products,
Contribute a lot to that problem.
they do.
Yeah.
But by adopting these zero-waste practices, offices can actually become part of the solution.
It's about changing the narrative.
Exactly. Turning those workplaces into forces for good.
And it's not just about reducing our environmental impact.
It's also about creating a more just and equitable world.
In what way?
Well, think about the communities most affected by plastic pollution.
The ones with limited resources.
Exactly. They often lack proper waste management infrastructure.
So environmental issues are tied to social justice issues.
Absolutely.
It's all connected.
It is. By reducing our reliance on single-use plastic, we're helping to create a healthier planet for everyone.
So to wrap up this deep dive into zero-waste offices, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think it all comes back to that idea of being intentional.
Oh, yeah.
Like the guidebook says, every choice we make, every product we buy has an impact.
We need to be mindful consumers.
Exactly. Both at work and in our personal lives.
It's about recognizing the value in things that are built to last.
Things that can be repaired and reused.
And that can eventually be returned to the earth without causing harm.
It's a journey.
Definitely not a destination.
There will be challenges along the way, but every step we take towards zero waste is a step in the right direction.
Couldn't agree more. So to everyone listening,
Whether you're just starting out,
or you're already a sustainability pro,
keep learning, keep trying new things, and keep sharing your journey.
because together we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into zero-waste offices.
We hope you found it informative.
And inspiring.
Don't forget to check out the show notes for all those resources and vendors we mentioned.
They're a great place to find more information and inspiration.
And until next time, happy zero wasting.
Happy zero